the realms of stalkers at this point? Because the definition of the word stalker has really changed with the advent of increased social media exposure, has it not?
Oh, without question. So basically, if there are certain characteristics and they've occurred on more than two separate occasions, like unwanted emails, showing up at certain places without a legitimate reason, sending flowers or unwanted items, if any of those things have occurred, then you pretty much fall under that definition of stalking.
And so, what do you say to people who say, "Oh, I'm just not going to worry about them"? Are stalkers really dangerous?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, but you're absolutely right, and that's
I'm
kind of
paid
where
to
we
I'm paid
find
to ask
a lot
those.
of the victims, and they wind up having trouble with that, and that is you don't know what's the serious problem, and when it's obviously serious and you're not doing something about it, and so really just trying to educate people on if someone is crossing a line with you, then you have to do a series of things like communication is huge with either your family, your coworkers, law enforcement, what have you.
And so, tell us examples of how we know when a stalker is, spewing sort of threats or insults or name calling, that kind of thing. How do you distinguish that from just a stalker who's going to remain online and somebody who truly is dangerous?
Yeah. So the first thing that we always recommend is that when you see and it first comes on your radar, you have to communicate with it. You have to have, let's use your staff, for example, if I can. They need to be educated and trained and at least understanding how to respond to that communication, however, so pleasantly. All right. But then from there, if they cross into your personal life, if they start showing up in your business, for example, or your home, or if you have children involved, and there's that uncomfort feeling, then it's time to take it to the next level, which would be contacting law enforcement, looking into the order of ex parte orders, protection orders, things of that nature.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you another question because a lot of people who are in my business, myself included, we travel all over the country. And I know where some of my most problematic stalkers live. When I go to those towns, even if I don't live in those towns, is there some sort of protection for those of us who travel a lot and might encounter stalkers because we're in places where public knows that we're there?
Yeah, and that's one of the things going back to your first question is that people have to start putting some type of security measure in place. When you have your meetings, you have to have the time and make the time to start having these discussions. But then when you start talking about traveling across state lines, and we do a lot of that when we have entertainment clients or we have corporate executive clients who have stalkers who want to travel from state to state or whether we're in that state. And so even though there's a federal law, and I think it's 18 U.S.C. 2261A, I believe, there's still those things that we have to have in place, and that's communicating with law enforcement to let them know that we have this issue, and also keeping a file, a data file on this individual. It's important. It's imperative.
And so, for those who maybe are out there and they're listening to this right now because they are stalkers, they are stalking someone. Tell them what you know about the way technology is going to stop them.
Yeah, that's huge. So as far as when it's all said and done, information is key, and information for a victim of stalking is everything. I think sometimes when a stalker knows something about you and you either A, know that person, but you don't know their intimate details, that's how we kind of begin to put ourselves and position ourselves in a position of fighting back, if you will. So the more information that we know on them, the more that we have a way to really put this to bed. And that can either be by getting information that can lead to a prosecution or finding something that they love that they may not want to have to deal with. So there are these methods and techniques that we use regularly, and it all really starts with information, and that's what's going to stop them, and they know it.
So there are really a couple of different types of stalkers. There are the hostile stalkers who maybe perhaps don't agree, for example, in our business with your politics. Or there are also the sort of love stalkers. But sometimes those love stalkers turn to something dangerous. What makes that happen, and how can you determine when this person who's been perhaps very nice and complimentary to you all of a sudden wants to meet with you, or they're getting angry if you won't meet with them, those kinds of things? How can you know when to really cut that relationship?
Right. And see, and therein lies the overall objective. How do you cut it? And that's really where these two options that you gave can flip flop. So, as you mentioned in your words, the love stalker, for example, who's friendly and, they're on your site, they may show up, they may want a photo, what have you. But then if one of your staff or someone is aggressive towards them, that might be that small cue that makes them now a nefarious threat. But then on the flip side of that, you could have someone that you already know has hostile and nefarious intentions. And so there's an assertive, responsive way that we'll deal with that. So really the whole line and key is not just necessarily ignoring the problem. And I think that's what a lot of people do. They find themselves saying, that's just Jim or that's just Stacy.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, there's a bigger picture to it. And it means that we have to not only deal and talk to them, but we have to also find a way to deal with them, because we don't know if they have mental issues or what the actual underlying motive may be.
And if you know they have mental issues, does that mean you probably should definitely report them?
Without question. I think the world is changing so drastically. I mean, we know that, of course, cyber stalking occurs, and we know that about 83% of that is email. But we also know that anything can escalate. So I think that whenever you have it, you should always report it.
All right.
And the last thing you want to do is find yourself in a position where you didn't report it and then something happens and that switch goes off.
Yes.
And now they've escalated and no one has any clue.
Thank you so much for being with us today. Michael Henderson, you are with Phoenix Risk Assessment.